So here we are again. This is the series of humanity webinars that Paul and I have kicked off this year. I'm suitably dressed, trying to live what I'm just about to talk about, in terms of part of which is well-being. And Paul suggested that we talk about self-leadership, which I think is critical, because I think leadership is pretty much down to self. So over to you, Paul. What are your thoughts?
It was actually, you asked me what to talk about today, and I thought, I was having a conversation with my trainer this morning. I mean, look, some people are just born with more ability to do the right thing. And, there are so many ways you can say there are two types of people, but, one of the, certainly from a management point of view, one that has been quoted a lot over the decades is the marshmallow test. Okay. Yeah. The delayed gratification, because all success is, success ultimately comes from sacrifice, and sacrifice is taking a hit in the present for providence and prosperity in the future.
Yeah.
But but I've always wondered about that, because from a really personal point of view, I actually think I had a lot more discipline when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I was actually able to I would have said, okay, I'll have 2 marshmallows later. It's when I became in later life that I sort of, fell into addiction and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think, net, what I would say is, I think self-leadership for me, and I think this probably is one of those questions that has to be answered at an individual level, is hard, but I've managed to put together a system of doing it. And as hard as it is, the alternative is far, far worse.
Yeah.
I would hate to be an undisciplined, flaky loser.
Yeah.
But if it weren't for certain rigors in my life, none the least of which is my relationship with the Almighty,
Yeah.
I have all the proclivities to be a sort of like pleasure-centric, hyper-addicted, flaky loser.
Yeah.
So, I wish I had something a bit wiser to say, but just thinking about it now, I haven't had my coffee in the afternoon. Something I said to my PT, and she's young, so she thinks I'm really wise because I say to this stuff. It's like, no one's probably ever said it to her before, but I go, you will be the product of the 5 people that you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
And I really, really believe that if you spend your time with quality top shelf people who are trying to do their best and live righteously, and from a professional point of view, try and delivering something world class, then that will rub off on you. I remember when I got into advertising, before I was in advertising, I used to do a lot of sales, and someone said, stick with money and it will rub off on you. And when I got into advertising, I was talking to someone about that, and they said it's the same with talent. Stick with talent and it will rub off on you. And I never forgot that. Yeah. And sure enough, it does. We're just, you can talk about this at greater length from a leadership and a human performance point of view. But we sort of like, we're drawn up by our environment, drawn up or drawn down, right? The team is as powerful as the weakest link. That kind of idea. So yeah, I think it's it's who you're around, and it's where you set your sight. Is your sight set high? Is your sight set low? Is it on the stars or is it on the earth? Is it on God or is it on the devil? Is it on the righteous or is it on the unrighteous?
Yeah.
Are you being high-minded and low-minded? And I used to be, I used to be a very low-minded creature, has to be said. So I think I'm going to wrap this up by saying I think that the hack for self-leadership is identity.
Yeah.
I'm sure I've told you this before, but I remember when I got into recovery, it's very, very difficult to predict who's going to stay clean and who won't.
Yeah.
And I spoke to a friend of mine who was he made a lot of money selling heroin, and then when he came into recovery, he made a lot of money in rehabs, getting addicts clean. And he was an Australian. And Australians are the biggest per capita gamblers on the planet. Yeah. And back in the days of Narcotics Anonymous in Sydney, when newcomers would come in, they would have bets on who was going to make it to 30 days.
Yeah.
And these guys knew a thing or two about punting. I mean, they really did. In this kind of area, they were mathematical geniuses. They had algorithms running in their heads. And he said, I could never figure it out. And the closest that I've come to figuring it out is if being clean is part of the identity that you aspire to. I remember when I got into AA, people talked about recovery, and I'd never heard that term before, but I thought it sounded cool. I mean, that's how facile and superficial I was. I go, oh, recovery sounds cool. That's I'm in recovery. I like the idea of being in recovery. And I think the other thing that happened is actually early recovery isn't very cool. It's full of, well, I won't go into that one because I'd be on that track for hours, but it's not much fun. But I started listening to a podcast in the US with a bunch of recovered cocaine addicts. I forget what it was called, but they made it sound really cool. They had a few years. It was in the US. I mean, I was in Malaysia at the time, and I was like, okay, I want to be that. And so it was my identity. So it was, what does someone in recovery do? Well, someone in recovery prays, meditates, gets to meetings, calls their sponsor, works the 12 steps, has sponsees, does service, and doesn't act like a douchebag. I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's kind of where I am, and that's one of the things that I talk to clients about when I work with them in the interim. It's we focus on three things: value that they provide and their company provides, but a lot of that comes from them intrinsically. Market, their ICP, who they should be talking to, and getting a greater understanding of that. And story, what is the story you tell to unify the three? And that's a catalyst for greater conversations. And, it ends up, I call that my Holy Trinity model. And the bit in the middle is the conversion story, which is the magic bullet. But when I'm talking to them about value, a lot of the time what I'm doing, I'm digging down into who they are. And I'm trying to do that in a way that creates a powerful emotional reality for the client, so that they can have an expanded view of themselves. And in that process, there's an opportunity for them to create a different, a fresh, or a bigger identity for themselves and the companies. And that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
Because if they can do that, then the rest of it is just filling in boxes, to be quite frank with you.
No, totally, yeah. I think, thank you for that. I think for me, it does come down to identity. I think, it's rather like when we started these discussions, Paul, and I think in part that's why it's good to have a series of discussions, because you can see where we started, because we started talking about professional development, and then we forgot actually what we are as human beings. And so I think what we are as human beings, you can either make it up yourself, which doesn't work out very well, which is what most of the world seems to be doing with a whole variety of self-righteous, self-centered definitions and attempts to redefine what's right or wrong, which no one's ever managed to do. And in fact, at its simplest level, ideology is always flawed because it's always too simple. So it's fundamentally a road to hell, that one. And we very much came down to the feeling, actually, who are we? In fact, it's interesting, when we started talking about this, we're both Christians, but we struggled, and I think it's been helpful for us to articulate and talk about this, to actually, to be honest, in terms of verbalizing this, actually helps to define your identity and actually check your own thinking. Because when you open your mouth, it intuitively whether or not something is right or wrong. So I think that's been an interesting journey for us. And I think specifically as human beings and passionate human beings, we are made to love God. And the question is, if we don't love God, what do we love? And you and I have had a pretty good.
You're going to love something. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. 100%. What
And
will you worship?
And I think there are a lot of people actually who probably love less harmful things that maybe you and I have. But I think that's only because we're passionate type of people, or class A type people, whatever you might call us. And I think there's a lot of people who still are sort of in that, not necessarily sort of pushing the boundaries like us as kids or big kids, but but still not quite discovering themselves. So I think and within that, there's also a degree of difficulty as well. And I've always sought out difficulty, which has always helped me find my identity. And at its simplest level, for example, chapter 1 of the Winning Thinking program is, when things get tough, don't put others first, don't put yourself first, put others first. And putting yourself first in a time of a crisis sort of equates to having a drink. Or something along those lines. And it's not really, but actually what's self-fulfilling, and I think that's part of what love is. It's about showing a selflessness when we're considering our different situations. So I think as well, from that place, and I totally agree in terms of network, who do we surround ourselves with? I personally have decided one of my objectives is to change and upgrade my network. So I know a lot of very influential people, even locally, and so I'm spending more time with them socially than I would do otherwise. That's absolutely critical. And I think a lot of it then is just about self-leadership. Is about, okay, something presents itself, whatever it might be, good or bad, and what do we do? Do we recognize it's good or bad? Do we get drawn into it? I think at the moment there's a lot of people, a lot of leaders trying to rationalize stuff which is wrong. And in so doing, they're actually getting themselves in a real mess.
Oh yeah.
And that's very dodgy territory. And I'm firmly of the belief that if you leave the door slightly ajar, then you've got the onslaught of the devil, frankly. And I think it helps to rationalize this stuff in terms of religious type language, because there is no other way of describing the current mess I think that business is getting itself into, apart from Christ or antichrist.
Christ or chaos, absolutely.
And actually I think, well, you say Christ or chaos, we could probably talk about that completely in one different session, but I think expecting anything else except for chaos is unrealistic. It's more about, because the Bible, for example, says, forget what's happening tomorrow, concentrate on today. And it's about trusting God in that journey. So I think chaos is standard because we don't have any control, or the thought that we can control the future, I think is unrealistic. The challenge is, I think, that is how do we respond to, let's say, chaos? And your definition of chaos is probably a bit different to mine, but there may be the ethos is the same.
No, the context of the expression is the bit that's a little bit different, but I understand where you're coming from. But yeah,
and I think there's a level of difficulty as well. So when and even churches actually, searching out what does good look like. Actually, there's a lot of the Bible talks about you only find what good looks like when things are difficult. In other words, when you've run out of your own self-righteousness. And I think you and I have probably found ourselves various times of our lives in that situation, and there's only one answer to that, and it's God. And I found that in company turnaround situations with people who are not necessarily Christians, but I've spoken to them on occasions about my faith and how we can approach practically the situation. This is what we can do, and this is what we can give to God. And actually, then they've then been on their own journey, and that testimony has been helpful. So, and I think in a practical perspective, if anybody's listening to this who may not be a Christian, I think Jordan Peterson talks about logos, and I think the Bible talks about a church, and when two Christians come together, there's that relationship pool that's established, and that is the church. It's not some sodding building. And I think there's a lot to be said for people in business actually searching out good relationships, practicing forgiveness, practicing grace, practicing some things which are the antithesis of what we're talking about, which is I'm right, you're wrong, self-righteousness type stuff. And actually, when you practice those things, you then get an inkling, actually, there's a less confrontational way to approach these situations. Because I think what's interesting at the moment is, well, I think it's worrying actually at the moment, is that because good and bad have almost been switched around, the wrong people are thriving, and that's dangerous, because the minute you silence, the wrong, or the minute you silence good people, you've then got a free for all. And I think there's an awful lot of very good people who are silent. And again, I think it's helpful for us to have this discipline between ourselves, Paul, to articulate these types of conversations, because it helps us live out ourselves in it, rather than just part of ourselves, rather than just talk about part of ourselves. Like, for example, what you were talking about, your methodology and the story and the value, and the other part makes complete sense. And I've experienced that, and it's great. But actually, that's not the whole Paul. that's only part of what Paul does. But actually, Jesus does talk. There's an unbelievably good storyteller, and an unbelievably good communicator. And no one ever won an argument against Jesus. I mean, there's so many bits of wisdom, and I think wisdom is, in terms of self leadership, Paul, wisdom's got to be the crux of it, frankly, because how else do you find wisdom without your faith in God?
You don't, because wisdom comes from God.
Exactly, yeah. So how does that lead business?
Proverbs 1:7. Well, yeah, absolutely. That's why I say something like Christ or chaos. If you don't have a biblical approach, and if you don't have the scripture as a lens to view life, then you're going to be viewing life wrongly. It's just as simple as that. I'm a fundamentalist.
Yeah, actually, on that point, actually, that's helped me to understand what you mean by chaos, because I think what we're witnessing is strategic chaos. In other words, people taking the wrong actions and fueling this machine. So I challenge, a lot of, so for example, after this chat GPT thing, controlling dialogue, or a machine controlling dialogue, there's a big question as to whether dialogue controls us or we control dialogue. I'm firmly of the view that dialogue mainly controls us, and it's got the power to do that.
Which is why the Marxists are so keen to control dialogue.
Yeah, and so I think there's things like that, and cryptocurrency is another one, which is all around this sort of this hellish utopia of redefining nations, and sodding the government, and government are corrupt, they're inflating and devaluating currency, etc. All of that sort of dialogue, and that's equally dangerous in terms of trashing institutions. So I think that I agree, in terms of people are pursuing strategies which are leading to chaos. So if that's what you mean by Christ or chaos, I agree with that. I think there are people, rather than taking a snap, what I was thinking of was taking a snapshot of now, Paul, which is relatively chaotic. The question is, are we making that worse, or are we making that better? I guess, in my own mind.
What do you mean by us? Do you mean like you and me as individuals, or society, or
us, you and I? So are the actions we're taking?
I absolutely, listen, I think what you and I sell is clarity and wisdom. We can go, forgive me, stop me if I've already said this to me before. I mean, I like to go on banging about being a chief spiritual officer, and you being a prophet. But I was actually thinking, a lot of the time when I sit down with a client, actually what I am is an exorcist, right? I try and remove all these horrible ideas that they've become attached to, okay? And not only horrible ideas, but limiting beliefs and dependencies. And I try and wrench those things out so that they can be free, okay? And I try and fill that with a more glorious view of the future. You do the same thing. Your approach is a lot more hands-on. It's a lot more technical. It's got more logistics. It's more pragmatic. It's more valuable in that it will actually save a company from the brink of disaster.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what are we bringing our clients? We're bringing them clarity, wisdom, and perspective.
Yeah.
What else? What else? You know,
Yeah.
they feel safe talking to us. We listen, and by virtue of the fact, because you know, I'm nothing special, you're
No.
nothing special,
No.
but given the fact that we're relatively, you know, we try and be halfway decent Christians, I think that gives us an incredible, sustainable competitive advantage.
Totally.
I mean,
Yeah.
I really do. I think we can see clearly what's going on
Yeah.
in
No,
this
that's
maelstrom.
yeah, and I think the
That's
alternative
really
is,
valuable.
well, the alternative is pretty hellish as well. And I think and or you're relying on the wrong things. So when those things are taken away from you, you really are stuck without a paddle. And I just listen to what coming back to what is the devil? Devil is the deceiver. So I think that is a very real plus also a certain amount of experience to actually say, hold on a minute, what you are doing is going to give rise to this. And so there's definitely a prophetic angle on that, which partly because which is it's partly wisdom, partly discernment. But I think the other thing is without, you know, well, I wouldn't even say not without bigging it up, but you know, anybody that takes anybody that takes us on is not just taking on Tom and Paul, they're taking on Jesus in a with the support, because our root is in God, Paul. So
yeah. We serve a mighty King.
we might tread on a lot of dog shit along the way and make a lot of mistakes, but actually you try to uproot us. If we are where we should be, then frankly a bit like what you know, the things that Jesus said, and we can only have a millionth of an attempt at replicating that. But even if we're a small part of that, that is extraordinarily differentiated, extraordinarily well rooted to prevent or fuel chaos.
Absolutely. And you know, our mission is clear. We have the Great Commission to know Christ and make Christ known. So all we have to do is, like, if we're just sharing our faith, as you just talked about, you know, like getting people on board by saying what we need to deploy here is love in industrial strength quantities, and people go, oh, and then you talk about that's it. You're doing kingdom work.
Yeah,
that's what our King wants from us.
I agree.
That's what we're here to do. That's
agree.
actually what we're here to do.
And the interesting thing about that, Paul, is that I've used the word love. You know, I occasionally when I'm sort of tuned in, I'll lean over the bar to the barmaid and say, Jesus loves you. And that just blows her away. It's like, well, no, it's like, and it's not a you know, an advance or anything else. It's just
it's funny you should say that, actually, because I actually said that to a waitress yesterday. I don't make a habit of it, and it was part of the conversation, but it was quite profound, the effect of saying that. I'm going to go and buy her a Bible. She's a really nice girl. Fantastic. I like doing that. I like engaging people in conversations, and I come back a little later and I bought them a Bible.
Yeah. And I also said the same thing to the former Northern Ireland minister. I talked to him about he was involved in gambling. He was responsible for gambling in Northern Ireland and the legislation.
Oh, that's gambling. A demonic.
and I said to him, I said, look, you know, and at the time I was actually running a business which is almost impossible to run without a Christian heart, which is a microfinance business, which is effectively lending small amounts of money to the poor, Paul, at high rates. And if you lend that money to the poor without the right heart, they won't pay you back.
Right. Okay.
And it's the most unbelievable. And I was introduced to this whole world, and it's an underworld. So if you go to any part of Liverpool in particular, but even posh parts of Guildford or Surrey, there's places where people live where they don't open their door, Paul, and they don't ever open their posts. They're too fearful, and they're so in debt that
like an underclass.
Yeah. And these people they can't take their kids to school. because they haven't, or the washing machine breaks and so they can't wash their clothes or something like this. There's a 13.5 million people in the UK, actually, according to the Joseph Rantry Foundation, that sort of fall into that type of category. And there's a world that services them called microfinance. And I was talking to, and I became very, well, I realized that this just couldn't operate at all, because it was so easy to take advantage of the poor. It's unbelievable. They're desperate people, a bit like a drug dealer, Paul, or some analogy like that.
Yeah.
Giving people drugs who are dependent on drugs, exactly the same type, level of control you could wield. And I said to the Northern Ireland minister, I used that testimony. I said, look, gambling's just the same. Unless you've got, unless you know what you love, then there's these other options. And gambling's one of those things which is potentially out of control unless you've got the right heart at the center of it. So, I think this is one thing I've noticed very practically. So I'm not talking from a flammy perspective. I've noticed very practically that in difficult times, things such as self-reliance, when it runs out, ceases to be an option. And I've experienced that, and I've discovered that grace and love are two practical things which enable you to move forwards, and forgiveness is at the center of that. And so from a really practical perspective, it's not some sort of wishy-washy type thing. It's absolutely critical. It's the only thing. Love is the only thing that repairs relationships, Paul. You know that. I mean, love is the only thing that actually brings people to realize they've done something wrong. It's the only thing that overcomes pride. It's the only indestructible emotion. And it's even more. Fear is love. Love triumphs over everything. Love triumphs over fear, any other emotion. So, and the interesting thing is when you use the word love in a business context, it blows people away. And that guy, this Northern Ireland minister, he was stopped in his tracks because he was a pretty heavy duty individual. He was no flammy fool, but I could see his physiology changed when I used the word love, and it hit him, and he wasn't a Christian either. So I think I think love has got a large part of this solution, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I just looked up 1 Corinthians 13, which is, because that's the other thing. It's like, what do we mean by love? And if you're a Christian, you can go, okay, well, this is what we mean by love. If I speak in tongues of men and angels, but have not love, I'm only going to be a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have the faith that can move mountains, but have not love, I'm nothing.
Yeah.
I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. And here we go. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. Yeah. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs, right? It's like, so, you start applying this criteria to the culture.
Yeah.
And, right? Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Okay, yeah. So truth has high value. Valuing the truth is an expression of love. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be still. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, we prophesy in part, but when perfection comes, the imperfection disappeared. When I was like a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see, I love this line, now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror. Then shall we see face to face. Yeah. Now I know in part, I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. Yeah. And these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. So that's the criteria of what love is. The big thing for me, which of course is Jordan Peterson's big thing, is truth.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
We have to have truth. And so telling someone the truth, delivering someone the truth. And yes, you can say that, you should try and do that with as much empathy and compassion as you can. Yes, you should, but you should deliver the truth.
Yeah. And I think it's a journey as well. It's around having love. Love is it's like the in a Venn diagram, it's the outer circle, and all the rest is sort of in the middle. And it's very imperfect. I mean, the other thing, because that also talks about childishness, and the other thing Jordan Peterson talks about is the utter childishness of narcissism, and the childishness of people who try to find their own identity other than male or female,
Of course,
which is not a corruption. And actually, you can tell when it's untruthful, right? Is the way people respond, Paul, because people who actually go through this, because they will get angry, and anger is a sign of, someone's actions being based on untruthfulness or not being able to articulate, or something that is sort of indefensible. And so this whole thing around untruths of defining their identity, and that's exactly the same psychology as a 2-year-old, exactly the same way a 2-year-old responds, very much around that childish response around their thinking they can define their own little world, which starts off very, very selfishly. So it's every part of that is, what you just read out is a whole lifetime's worth of learning, isn't it? I mean, you could read that every day and still never figure that out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's profound.
Absolutely.
It's like, it's like you get it, but it's like, that's why, I never forget one of my spiritual father, he said, always use the scripture, always use the scripture. And I was like, whenever I'm talking to people, as much as I can, just use scripture.
I know. And that's what Jesus did, wasn't it? Amazing enough.
With the devil, rather than argue with the devil, he used scripture.
I know. It's amazing, given the fact he wrote the book.
Well, it is, because when you think about it, it's like the devil is a created being. Jesus is God. So if Jesus just wanted to go kazam, right? He could have done all that, but he actually decided to use scripture on the devil.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting, isn't it?
And he also decided he wanted us to be ourselves rather than create robots, because he could sort this whole situation out tomorrow. He doesn't want that. He wants us to do pretty much what we're doing, Paul, and he's delighted in us, which is extraordinary. But those perspectives around love, what is love, discovering love, when people discover love, particularly in a business context, I think that's a very exciting place, and people actually discover themselves. And this is what I mean by logos. And I think non-Christians, and what I encourage with the Winning Thinking program, so I don't insist, obviously, that people that do the Winning Thinking program are Christians.
I see, that's your mistake. You should convert all pagans.
But I can rationalize. I can get people to realize that what does good look like? It's about having love and appreciation for each other, acknowledging each other, and it's also a feeling of brokenness as opposed to pride. It's not about the ultimate blessing or the ultimate sort of place to be. And from a practical perspective, if you think about it, if you're slightly broken, you're much more likely to receive information accurately and take it. And it's the antithesis of pride. So I think it's about, and that's also humility, because it's so bizarre to think we've got control over this situation. So pride is it's the reason why Jesus said,
that's why pride's so dangerous. That's why God hates it. I mean, he hates it.
Yeah, well, it's an abomination.
And if he hates it, we're supposed to hate it as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I can feel that. I can feel that abomination when I look at certain types of businesses. I mean, crypto is one of them, artificial intelligence another one, parasitic technology broadly. Things that are people use the word sort of disruptive, but actually a lot of those business models are destroying. Just actually destroying. And they're also controlling profits. They're taking profits out, because if you take booking.com and they're taking 30% of your profit pool, and you try marketing yourself without it, and that to me is a degree of control which is unhealthy, and that's a margin that should be opposed to some intermediary that's taking a large percentage of your sales. So I think those business models really do need to be called out, because they are destructive. And Chat GPT is really concerning to me, because in controlling dialogue, that is very, very, very likely to, well, it's almost certain, because people do not realize the dialogue that they spew out of their mouth and the significance of it.
Wait until it starts selling ads.
What was that? Sorry?
Wait until you can start advertising in there.
Wait till I what?
Wait till you can start advertising in Chat GPT.
Can you imagine it? Do you know what I think? Do you know what I think is going to happen with artificial intelligence? I think people are going to be taken out of the equation completely, and you're going to have artificial intelligence companies fighting over each other directly, just AI to AI, and we're just going to be out of it completely. I'm almost certain of that. I'm also almost certain of the fact that artificial intelligence will definitely be able to control people to the point whereby they can actually control their actions. Well, you can see that at the moment, Paul. We're actually living through that at the moment. We're talking about things that are fundamentally wrong. I do believe that the dialogue, the control of dialogue, even within LinkedIn or what's right or wrong, is already there, even without artificial intelligence. This cancel culture, it's cancelling the wrong stuff. It's anti-Christ. It's people who are speaking up against.
It's anti-Christ and it's anti-truth. God bless Jordan Peterson for bringing that concept to light. It's not just wrong. It's not just a lie. It's actually the very opposite of what should be happening, right? It's like it, and so it is. I mean, I suppose anti-Christ explains. I suppose anti-truth is an expression of anti-Christ to the secular.
Yeah, I agree totally. Yeah, no, I think you're right. Truth is, I mean, truth. Well, it's truth, beauty, and good. It's about being good as well. So I think absolutely fantastic. Well, that's a great conversation, Paul. I think we nailed that one.
Absolutely.
I've enjoyed that. Thank you. Good.
I'm going to hop on a call at 5 o'clock with my coach, and then I'm off to Deliverance. Hopefully, my boxing trainer is going to be there.
Yeah, brilliant. Actually, that reminds me, I'm going to try and drag my wife down, because again, I think in a family context, it's critical that the husband and wife.
Yes, it's your job.
I know.
It's your job.
Husband and wife.
Get the club.
Absolutely, but the husband and wife and God triangle is critical, and the kids below that. That's another practical thing the Bible talks about. So,
well, it's not. Except it's not a triangle. It's a line, isn't it? It's Jesus, you, your wife.
Yeah, it is a line. Yeah.
Jesus is the head of you. You're the head of your wife, and then it's your wife, and then it's your daughters underneath it. So it's a straight through line.
Yeah. You're less diplomatic than me on that one, Paul. That's interesting, but quite entertaining. Thank you for that. I was trying to be diplomatic, but you're absolutely right, technically speaking.
Yeah.
Great to see you, my friend. Take care.
All right. Have a wonderful time at church. We can compare notes over the weekend.
Yeah, for sure. Let's speak then. Cheers, man.
Bye.
Bye.